In our headlines at this hour, President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed the National Assembly for the first time on this Monday, urging lawmakers to bridge their gap over differences to make way for the nation's best interests at heart. Close to 400,000 people have been reported with fever over the past 24 hours in North Korea, while its leader blasts officials over medical supplies. Meanwhile, BTS has done it again by winning 3 honors at this year's Billboard Music Awards. The South Korean boy band now has the most Billboard trophies in history. Hope your work week is off to a good start. This is the Daily Report for Monday afternoon, May 16th here in South Korea. I'm Min San-hee. We start our newscast today with President Yoon Suk-yeol's first address to the National Assembly earlier on this Monday, during which he expressed intentions, that is, to touch upon economic collaboration with Washington during talks with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden later this week here in Seoul. Do take a listen.
이번 주에 방한하는 미국 바이든 대통령과 인도 태평양 경제 프레임워크를 통한 글로벌 공급망 협력 강화 방안을 논의할 것입니다. 공급망 안정화 방안뿐 아니라 디지털 경제와 탄소 중립 등 다양한 경제 안보에 관련된 사안이 포함될 것입니다.
With regard to the COVID-19 situation in North Korea, President Yoon said he would spare no effort to provide support, including vaccines, medical supplies and health workers to the people up north should Pyongyang respond. He did, however, acknowledge that the security situation on the peninsula remains tense amid North Korea's acts of provocation, including last week's test firing of ballistic missiles just a few days after the launch of his new administration. Now, Yoon urged for sustainable peace built on trust, with Pyongyang surrendering its nuclear ambitions. Also, on the local front, Minister of Economy and Finance Choo Kyung-ho and Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong have agreed that the government and the central bank need to work together on economic policies. The remarks to this end were shared during their first official meeting also on this Monday since the start of the new administration. Choo claimed the economic situation both here and abroad remains unstable, with the local economy highly vulnerable to surging global prices for energy and commodities amid the war in Ukraine. He, for his part, called for prompt policy coordination between government departments and the central bank amid the weakening Korean won and the rising inflationary pressure over in the U.S. Across the border in North Korea, authorities have reported close to 400,000 new cases of fever over the past 24 hours. Now, its limited testing capacity appears to be delaying this confirmation of COVID-19, while the lack of vaccines and treatment is casting a grim light on the fate of people there. Our Song Yoo-jin reports.
COVID-19 continues to take a toll on North Korea. The North's National Emergency Quarantine Command Center confirmed on Monday that 392,920 new suspected cases of the virus was reported on Sunday. There were 8 additional deaths to bring the total to 50. However, figures for tallies could be underreported due to shortage in testing equipment. Amid the escalating number of infections, the regime's leader Kim Jong-un criticized the supply of medication to pharmacies during a Politburo meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea on Sunday. The state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that Kim reprimanded relevant officials for the delay in supplying previously ordered medication and for failing to regulate increased stockpiling and illegal distribution of medicine. The KCNA added that Kim laid out fresh virus prevention measures during the meeting, including mobilizing troops to stabilize medical supplies in the capital, Pyongyang. Meanwhile, in an effort to contain the virus, Pyongyang has reportedly asked Beijing for antivirus supplies. According to sources familiar with North Korea-China relations on Sunday, relevant discussions are currently underway, although no further details were given. China has previously said it will immediately provide assistance upon the North's request. The border between the two countries remains closed to contain the virus, but could reopen for supply shipments. However, despite attempts to curb the spread of COVID-19, forecasters say that Pyongyang could ultimately fail in their efforts. An analysis by CNN on Sunday local time pointed to a lack of healthcare infrastructure and testing equipment in the north, which could hinder it from treating a large number of patients suffering from an infectious disease. It added the regime possesses one of the world's most fragile public health systems, and a widely unvaccinated population paints a grim picture of the future there. 송유진, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to significant shifts in security arrangements in Europe. Finland and Sweden have officially announced intentions to join NATO. Our Kim Hyo-sun has details.
The Finnish government has officially announced its intention to join NATO, foregoing their decades-long history of military neutrality and ignoring Russian threats of possible retaliation.
We have reached today an important decision in good cooperation between the government and the President of the Republic. We hope that the Parliament will confirm the decision to apply for NATO membership during the coming days. It will be based on a strong mandate.
A formal membership application will be submitted to NATO headquarters in Brussels following approval by the Finnish Parliament. The decision risks possible retaliation by Moscow, whose President Vladimir Putin said Saturday that abandoning military neutrality and joining the bloc would be a mistake. The next day, the Finnish President Sauli Niinistö said his latest discussions with Putin did not contain any threats, adding Putin was calm and cool. Just hours after Finland's announcement, Sweden's ruling party followed suit, saying Sweden will also look to join the Western alliance.
With this in mind, our conclusion is that as a member of NATO, Sweden will not only achieve more security, but also contribute to more security. Within NATO, Sweden will be a security provider. And the Social Democratic Party will support an application for NATO membership together with Finland.
The head of NATO played down any risks to swift membership for the two Nordic countries, adding Turkey has stressed it does not intend to try and block the membership.
So my intention is still to have a quick and swift process where we will then sit down with Finland and Sweden if they apply, agree the accession protocol, and then hope and work for a very speedy ratification process in the 30 parliaments.
NATO membership requires support from all of the current 30 allies, including Turkey, which has accused Finland and Sweden of supporting Kurdish groups. NATO further explained it will take proactive steps to provide Helsinki and Stockholm with extra protection until their membership is finalized. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's COVID-19 tally fell below the 20,000 mark for the first time in more than 100 days. On Monday, the country recorded slightly over 13,000 new infections amid the weekend factor. Separately, health authorities here have agreed to offer COVID-19 treatment pills to more patients. Starting on this Monday, Pfizer's Paxlovid will be given to teenagers and adults with pre-existing health conditions. Also, Merck's Lagevrio has been approved for COVID-19 patients here in Korea and will be available to adults with underlying medical conditions. Previously, these drugs were only administered to senior patients over 60 or those over 40 who are immunocompromised. In related news, the lifting of outdoor mask requirements has led to soaring sales at convenience stores, especially those near the Han River, while the absence of curfews has revived nightlife, especially here in the capital city. Our Shin Yoon was out and about.
Starting this May, South Korea has gone maskless as long as people are outdoors.
We're now in the second week since authorities have lifted outdoor mask mandates. Thanks to this, many people, including myself, have taken a step closer to returning to life as it was before the pandemic.
This is great news for businesses, particularly convenience stores. One of South Korea's biggest convenience store chains, CU, saw its overall sales rise by 15% for the week after mask mandates were lifted, compared to the week before.
Ever since people were allowed to remove masks when outdoors from this month, we've seen many customers visit our convenience stores. Many looked for cold drinks due to the warmer weather.
The products showing the highest hike in sales were water, carbonated drinks, canned coffee, and sports drinks. Liquor sales jumped by double digits as well.
Convenience stores near the Han River in particular have seen a rise in sales, and that's because there's lots of places for people to eat while enjoying the weather and the view. 기분이 어떠세요?
이제 마스크 벗을 수 있어서 좋아요.
여러분은 어떠세요?
좋아요. 와.
We've also seen life begin to return to normal at night. Ever since the government scrapped restrictions on business operation hours, more and more people hit the streets of Gangnam to enjoy Seoul's nightlife.
Pubs and bars benefited the most because no curfew means more time to enjoy the nightlife. Cheers!
We barely had any customers when there was a curfew, but now we have so many that we sometimes run out of seats. Sales went up by 30 to 40%.
According to BC Card, sales at bars increased by 47% compared to before the country began relaxing social distancing measures. Corporate credit cards were used by more than 70% of customers, which means there have been more get-togethers among company workers. And businesses are set to see sales continue to rise with the relaxing of even more measures under the new Yoon administration. 신예은, Arirang News.
On the export front, outbound shipments of South Korea's eco-friendly cars hit a fresh high in April. Our Ji-young has the findings.
Despite the ongoing disruption to global supply chains, South Korea's exports of eco-friendly cars hit a record high in April, with the shipments posting an increase for the 16th straight month. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Monday that outbound shipments last month came to around 48,000 units. This is up about 40% on year. Also, the dollar value of eco-friendly auto exports soared by 42%, hitting $1.32 billion in April. The dollar value of exports also surpassed $1 billion for the 8th month in a row. In addition, the dollar value of the eco-friendly vehicle exports accounted for more than 30% of South Korea's overall auto exports. The ministry attributed the rise to the popularity of hybrid cars, with new models including Kia Motors' redesigned Sportage and Renault Korea Motors' XM3 doing particularly well overseas. Domestic sales of eco-friendly cars in April also reached a record high for the second month in a row. The number sold within the country has risen for 3 months in a row, standing at around 40,000 a month, up roughly 60% on year. In particular, sales of domestically produced eco-friendly cars jumped nearly 84% on year. Ji-young, Arirang News.
On the local political front, Korea is looking ahead to a rather deciding vote come June 1st. In fact, the results of the local elections then look to determine the feasibility of the Yoon administration's 5-year action plans. Our Kim Do-yeon explains.
COVID-19 relief, real estate development, and even taxes. These are some of the areas that not only the president, but also regional governments have powers over in South Korea. On June 1st, voters will head to the polls to decide on governors or mayors of the 17 provincial governments. And with President Yoon's administration kicking off last week with big plans, the election results will have a huge impact on his 5-year term, as he will want the backing of regional governments with 4-year terms for the winning candidates. On the other hand, the Democratic Party of Korea will be able to redeem themselves following disappointment in the presidential election by taking regional chief posts such as Seoul Mayor or Governor of Gyeonggi-do Province, where they'll be able to influence the country's policies. So who exactly are voters electing? Most voters in South Korea will be voting in 7 different elections, from local district council members to regional education superintendents. There are around 4,100 seats up for grabs, and more than 7,600 candidates are running to fill those spots. How are things looking now? Currently, the 2 largest cities are run by mayors from the president's party, the People Power Party. However, the majority of regional governments are controlled by the Democratic Party of Korea, and the most populous province, Gyeonggi-do's top office, is only vacant as former Democratic Party of Korea's presidential candidate Lee Chang-yong resigned to run in the presidential race. How much power do regional governments have? The 17 regional leaders especially have enormous impact on the residents of their districts. Perhaps the most powerful being in the nation's capital, where the mayor oversees an annual budget of more than $30 billion and is responsible for around 10 million residents. The Seoul mayor participates in weekly cabinet meetings, and while the position does not include a right to vote, the winning candidate will have a direct channel to the president. What if positions are uncontested? Naturally, with so many posts open for elections, some will go uncontested, meaning the number of candidates is the same as open posts. This time around, nearly 500 positions have been filled without the need for a vote, a five-fold jump since the last local elections 4 years ago. One explanation for this is that in regions where political preferences have become more distinct, the less popular parties have chosen to opt out. Who's eligible to vote? The recent introduction of a new law means the voting age has been lowered to 18 years old. All Koreans over that age are eligible to vote. One thing to note here is that for local elections, foreigners who have been permanent residents for at least 3 years are also able to participate. They are unable to vote in presidential or general elections. Official campaigning starts on Thursday, and early voting opens on the 27th and 28th of May. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Right, and that brings us to the end of part 1 of the Daily Report. We'll be back in a few minutes with part 2, during which we'll address the new administration's foreign policy priorities. Stay with us.
Arirang, what matters?
Welcome to part 2 of the Daily Report. It's in today's segment of Viewpoint. We touch upon the Yoon administration's foreign policy priorities as shared over the past week since taking office. For more, I have Professor Min Jung-hoon from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, it's good to see you again.
My pleasure.
I also have Professor Mason Ritchie at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies live on the line. Professor Ritchie, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Right, Professor Min, let's start with Seoul's ties with Washington then. The first foreign delegation to the presidential office in Yongsan was led by Douglas Emhoff, the husband of US Vice President Kamala Harris, last week. Do you suppose this pecking order is further indication of the Yoon administration's priority on its ties with the Biden administration?
Well, basically, I don't want to put too much political consideration for the diplomatic protocol, but I think that pecking order shows some kind of the symbolic movement that about the policy directions of the new South Korean government. As you mentioned, I also think that the pecking order shows symbolically that the Yoon government put its policy priority to strengthen the ROK-US alliance during its term in office. And regarding the diplomatic direction of the Yoon government, it is known that the priority policy goal is to solidify South Korea's status as a global pivotal country to contribute to freedom, peace, and prosperity. So it is expected that Yoon government is likely to work closely with the United States to stably manage the security situation on the Korean Peninsula. And to that end, it will try to rebuild the combined defense posture and strengthen the ROK-US extended deterrence against North Korea's the provocations or the nuclear threats. And in addition, the Yoon government is also likely to strengthen its cooperation with the U.S. In high-tech and strategic industries like semiconductors, large volume batteries, and COVID-19 vaccines. And the Yoon government will also try to play a bigger role in preserving universal values like freedom, human rights, and the rule of law as a responsible advanced country in the international community. So overall, it is expected that Yoon government will put its policy priority to strengthen its ties with Washington during its term in office, although I don't want to put too much political consideration for that.
Right, of course. Professor Ritchie, President Yoon Suk-yeol's first telephone conversation with a foreign leader following his election victory was US President Joe Biden, and that call came just 5 hours after the announcement of Yoon's win. What are your thoughts on the timing of this particular exchange?
Well, I think a lot of it indicates how important the alliance is for Yoon and for his foreign security and defense policy team. And I could go on in more detail, but I think Professor Min has already covered a lot of that. I guess what I would probably add to that would be, for President Yoon, I think this was a sort of cherry on the cake after a campaign that really zeroed in on rectifying what the Yoon campaign considered to be some weakness in Moon Jae-in's support for the alliance, and indicating a tilt back towards more traditionally how the Conservative Party here allies with the United States, and I think that that's not only about North Korea, of course, and that's not only about the sort of traditional good working relationship between the conservatives in Korea and the U.S. Establishment in Washington. But I think it also reflects how dangerous a time we are in terms of the global order. Obviously with Russia's attack in Ukraine, with a rising China, and with what we call liberal international order, which is under threat. I think Yoon and his foreign security and defense policy team recognized that allying with the United States in a stronger fashion going forward is going to be necessary, not only to help South Korea meet its interests going forward, but also it's the right thing to do in terms of values. So I think that the phone call coming right afterwards, I think, and that conversation taking place so quickly, got the Yoon administration off on a positive note with Biden. And of course, that's just going to be underscored with President Biden coming here for the summit starting on the 20th.
Right. And President Professor Min, of course, moving forward, last Thursday, North Korea test-fired 3 ballistic missiles toward the East Sea, and the firing came just hours after it confirmed its first COVID-19 outbreak. What do you think are Pyongyang's intentions?
First, I want to say that I'm so sorry to say that the North Korean people are now suffering from the COVID-19 virus, considering that North Korea does not have enough medical capabilities of controlling for the spread of the virus in its territory. And its people have not been vaccinated fully. It is concerned that the damage could be huge in the coming months. And regarding the recent North Korea's provocations to shoot the 3 ballistic missiles, I think Pyongyang wanted to send a message to the international community that it will continue to enhance its military capabilities as planned. But regarding the possibility of the making further the provocations in the coming weeks and months, I think there is also a possibility that Pyongyang will refrain from the making another provocations for the time being. So I think the North Korean regime realized that the situation is totally out of control. And therefore, it is asking helping hand to the international community. And the international community, as you know, including South Korea, US, and Japan and China, mentioned that they are willing to help North Korea just out of the humanitarian consideration. But if Pyongyang makes another provocation in the coming weeks and months, it would put the international community in a more difficult situation to help North Korean people. Although the international community has maintained the position that humanitarian assistance should be separate from the political and military consideration. So I hope that Pyongyang will put its policy priority to cope with the spread of the virus in the coming weeks and months and show sensible or discreet attitudes, just not making the missiles or the provocations.
Right, of course. Professor Richard, in his inauguration speech, President Yoon spoke of significant support for North Korea should it surrender its nuclear ambitions. Now, these remarks stand in sharp contrast to his hardline rhetoric against Pyongyang's provocations while on the campaign trail. How do you explain this shift in stance, so to speak?
Well, I think to some degree, this reflects just the reality of governing. When you're on the campaign trail and you're trying to differentiate yourself from the candidate from the opposite party, whose party is known for privileging engagement with Pyongyang rather than a harder line stance, that's one thing. It's a different thing, of course, once you become elected and once you start actually looking at getting into office, you have to begin to govern. And of course, there are risks to inflammatory rhetoric. There are trade-offs to vocalizing a hardline stance. And so I think that's certainly part of it. I think part of it, too, is I'm sure Yoon and his team want to come in and see how North Korea behaves on their watch. I think it's probably also the case, that they want to see, how the North Koreans react sort of on their own in a vacuum, I guess you would say, prior to Biden coming here for the summit. So I think that there's a little bit of a sort of stepping back from campaign rhetoric because now you're governing, and I think that's also in terms of the change of rhetoric, after taking over and assuming office. Simply a matter of being more calculating and analytical, rather than speaking fierily and perhaps without thinking very clearly through the consequences of statements. There'll be plenty of time and certainly plenty of occasions for the Yoon administration to adopt the types of hardline language which conservatives frequently have done. And I'll also point out that it's not like Yoon has gotten into office and hasn't continued to stress, and his team members haven't continued to stress what they ultimately think is the right way to go forward with North Korea, which is normalization of relations with Pyongyang happening through the process of denuclearization. rather than normalization efforts happening first and denuclearization happening later. That hasn't changed at all.
Right. And to achieve that purpose, Professor Min, it has been said by some that the Yoon administration may adopt a carrot and stick policy with regard to North Korea. How feasible do you suppose this policy will be?
Well, currently it seems that the Yoon government is focused on implementing the stick policy because of the repeated provocations by North Korea. But basically, I think Yoon government has the policy directions on North Korea that it will strongly respond to North Korea's provocations, while it will also open the door to talk with North Korea for the international, inter-Korean cooperation. But as you know, President mentioned during the presidential campaign that North Korea's illegal and unreasonable actions would be dealt with firmly following the principle, but the door to inter-Korean dialogue will be open at any time. So, but in terms of the governing period, we can see what will be the tone down the statements by the South Korean government. And but considering the situation where North Korea repeatedly makes provocations and doesn't respond to the Biden administration's request to come back to the negotiating table, it seems that Yoon government will put its policy priority to strongly respond to the North Korea's provocations or the nuclear threats for the time being. So I think that under the principle of peace through strength, Yoon government will try to enhance its military cooperation with the U.S. to deter North Korea's provocations, such as reconfirming U.S. extended deterrence for South Korea, revitalizing the joint military exercises, and deploying U.S. strategic assets to the Korean Peninsula. Meanwhile, it is expected that it will take some time before we can see any meaningful progress to resume the North Korea-U.S. nuclear talks in the coming months. So for the time being, it is expected that we will see a little bit grave security situations on the Korean Peninsula.
Right. And beyond the Korean Peninsula, Professor Ritchie, the Yoon administration seeks to, that is, enhance its ties with neighboring Japan. Now, speaking to Japanese lawmakers who had attended his inauguration, President Yoon said he opposed politicizing historical matters. What are your thoughts on this?
So, in the first place, both the Yoon campaign and the Yoon administration, once it's come into office, has clearly repeated multiple times that improving Seoul-Tokyo relations is an important part of his foreign policy. And that's not only vis-a-vis the bilateral Seoul-Tokyo relation, but also important for how the U.S.-South Korea alliance functions. The Biden administration has always put significant stock in improving Seoul-Tokyo relations in order to lead to better trilateral alliance cooperation between Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo. This will almost certainly come up in some significant form in the upcoming summit. Now, that desire, however, is quite different from how easy it's going to be to execute in reality. And it's a very nice thing to say that you wish not to, as president, to politicize Seoul-Tokyo relations. But the reality is they are politicized. Domestically, that's a very difficult issue here. It's especially a very difficult issue for the Democratic Party. And not only as voters, but also, of course, members of the National Assembly and of the party leadership. So it's inevitably going to be politicized. And it's not only politicized, it's also a judicial issue as well. The rulings that have come in, from the various judicial bodies on repayments for comfort women and for, other exploitation of Korean labor during the Japanese colonial period are a matter for the justice system. They're not only a matter for foreign policy, and they're not even only a matter for politics. So this is going to be very thorny, and Japan is not going to simply allow Yoon to back away from this issue. It's going to be something that's going to require him to deal with the politics also.
Right, it might be easier said than done. All right, Professor Ritchie, thank you so much for your time today and your thoughts. And Professor Min here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the entertainment front, K-pop sensation BTS has taken it smooth like butter at this year's Billboard Music Awards with 3 honors. The group now has the most Billboard trophies in history. Our Kim Jong-un has the highlights.
BTS has yet again made history at the 2022 Billboard Music Awards, one of the 3 most prestigious music awards in the United States. The South Korean pop stars on Sunday won 3 awards from the total of 6 categories for which they were nominated. They won Top Duo or Group, Top Song Sales Artist, as well as Top Selling Song for their hit Butter, picking up all 3 gongs for a 2nd straight year. This also marks their 3rd win for Top Duo or Group, now sharing the record with One Direction. BTS was nominated for a total of 7 awards in 6 categories, with both Butter and Permission to Dance nominated for Top Selling Song. This is the highest number of nods seen by BTS for the awards. Last year, the boy band was nominated for 4 and won all of them. With a total of 12 Billboard Music Awards, BTS has now become the group with the most honors in the awards history, breaking Destiny's Child's previous record of 11. That record had been in place for 17 years. The group has also secured at least 1 trophy at the Billboard Music Awards for 6 straight years since their first nomination in 2017. This year's prizes were based on Billboard chart data from April 10, 2021 through March 26, 2022. Choi Min-jang, Arirang News.
The weekend-long K-pop music festival K-pop Flex wrapped up on Sunday at the Deutsche Bank Park Stadium in Frankfurt, Germany, where the 2-day event marked the largest K-pop festival ever held in Europe. Now, the festival saw 44,000 seats sold, all on the first day, with 30,000 more attending the event on day 2. The festival featured many of K-pop's top groups, including ENHYPEN, Mamamoo, and NCT Dream. And in our feature segment on this Monday, we chronicle the history of K-pop from its start to its present. My colleague Kim Bo-kyung has this coverage.
Korean idols. It is no exaggeration to call them the very center of K-pop. Fans find not only joy but also comfort from listening to their songs and buying their merchandise.
혹시 어떤 아이돌 좋아하세요?
저는 우즈라는 아이돌을 좋아하고 이제 본업이 이제 무대에서 노래를 하고 춤을 추는 게 본인이 좋아서 하는 거잖아요. 근데 이제 무대를 하면서 웃고 행복해하는 모습을 보면서 나도 저렇게 하고 싶은 일을 하면서 행복하고 싶다라는 느낌을 받는 팬들이 많은 것 같아요. 저도 그래서 좋아하는 것 같고.
Ever since the genre emerged, K-pop has been quickly broadening its boundaries. And as the world experiences distinctive features, its infectious charm and choreography, it is no longer seen as a niche genre or subculture, but rather a genre for listeners around the world to enjoy. With idol groups present for many years, people started to divide them into generations. Experts usually say that K-pop genealogy can be traced back to the mid-1990s. And although a line cannot be clearly drawn, the representative groups for each generation changed every 5 to 10 years. From the groups that spurred on the very beginning of the K-pop wave to the most recent idols in the so-called fourth generation. Let's dig deeper into the K-pop scene for each generation. The mid to late 1990s saw the arrival of K-pop's first generation of stars. Influenced by the groups Hoteji and Boys, SM Entertainment's H.O.T. and SCS, along with DSP Media's Finkel and Juxkiss, paved the way for artists to come up with Korea's own dance and hip-hop music.
We could say this was a so-called K-pop test period without a proper management system or agencies. With no system in place, individual producers brought ideas rather than know-how to create the environment. Lee Soo-man played a key role, and thanks to him, other producers emerged too. The reigning aesthetic during this generation was dubbed African-American style hip-hop music, on top of which other experimental music could be added.
After the first generation, the grand renaissance of the K-pop industry came. The mid-2000s to the early 2010s could be considered the time when numerous pioneering acts helped shape today's global K-pop industry and the Hallyu wave that followed. Among them were TVXQ, Super Junior, Girls' Generation, SHINee, 21, Wonder Girls, and so on. Addictive, captivating melodies and choreography perfectly in sync, all of them fully supported by big entertainment production agencies. It was enough to broaden the fandom boundaries. Both first and second generation K-pop idol groups addressed similar themes in their music. Boy groups would complain about the education system, while girl groups would talk about mellow and soft love stories. However, the biggest difference between the first and the second generations was the potential to expand the stardom in the global market.
First generation idol, such as H.O.T. or like SES, Jax Kiss, although some of them made some international success in, let's say, China or other parts of some East Asia, but basically they and their entertainment agency did not really think the international market is the very important part for their career. They were basically the local musician making music for the local audience, just like the Korean audience. But since the second generation, they now found the very possibility of like their music becoming globally successful. So because of the Hallyu history, because of the success of the other Hallyu products such as Korean TV series or Korean films, so the second generation idol and their entertainment agency thought more seriously that they could be the international star. But
Still, however, the popularity of these groups remained within Asian borders, with Korean idols sweeping the charts mainly in East Asian countries such as China, Hong Kong, and Japan. That is until a major boom turned the tide. The third generation of idols made their debuts in the early 2010s. BTS finally sprang on the scene and brought worldwide attention to the K-pop industry and pushed K-pop beyond Asian countries. BTS, Twice, Blackpink, and Mamamoo are the most well-known acts to come from this crop of artists, and their music styles have become more diverse as they are no longer just targeting local listeners. The messages shared in their songs also started to change, telling their fans how important it is to love themselves and encouraging listeners to be courageous. The messages found in the lyrics was not the only change. How music is released, the length of albums, and even the way K-pop groups are promoted became very different through the years, resulting in a heavier workload for idols in a constant cycle of releasing and promoting new music.
Basically, first and second generation idols would have to do a lot of promotion right up to and after the release of their follow-up song, which usually came a month after an album was released. But as time passed, the number of songs on a full-length album went down from 10 to 5 or 6 songs, and idols started to release more singles or so-called EP mini-albums. Because the number of idols increased so much, they constantly had to promote their music, which meant shortening the gap between performances and album releases and appearing more often with singles.
Amid fierce competition among the large number of acts, not all idol groups got the chance to showcase their talents on major broadcasters. This made them use more diverse channels to promote themselves and come up with their own unique content. YouTube was the easiest platform to do that, and over-the-top services, including Netflix, was another method used to reach fans. Algorithms led fans of one K-pop act to other K-pop groups, creating a ripple effect that ensured fans around the world to keep a close eye on K-pop idols and the industry. Against this backdrop, the fourth generation arrived. In the early 2020s, new idol groups such as ITZY, IVE, G-Idol, TXT, aespa, and ENHYPEN were unveiled. Thanks to BTS, who paved the way for idols to shine in global music market, fourth generation idols now consider themselves as global artists with international audience in mind with everything they do.
they are thinking about their identity as actually the global or the international pop star rather than only limited in local market. And they also know that even before making their debut, that they can get a chance to be known to the international audience. K-pop is becoming really global kind of genre, which means that there are a lot more fans who are waiting for new music, new artists, which means that they are subscribing the news site about the K-pop, who will make their debut in this month or late next month, and from which entertainment agency.
Now with solid fandom and a concrete music base, idols are expanding musical diversity even more, from just dance music that was a major genre to more experimental genres. This is more apparent now as many idols have their own professional composers among group members, like for example Jeon So-yeon in G-Idol. And bands now incorporate their own unique style rather than following what producers from agencies want them to be like. X are also exploring totally new concepts like aespa, whose group identity is connected to avatars in the digital space so that each member can appear virtually in music videos and performances. From the first generation to the fourth, with the passage of time, the representative idol groups that swept the charts and enjoyed popularity have changed. Yet K-pop idols, a major part of an overhaul in Korea's arts and entertainment sector, have consistently expanded their influence from the beginning. Now that K-pop is receiving worldwide attention from global fans, it won't come as a surprise to see more global superstars like BTS continuing that success. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Turning to the US on Saturday, where an 18-year-old gunman shot and killed 10 people and wounded 3 others at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. Following the attack, the suspect surrendered in what authorities are calling a hate crime. The perpetrator had armed himself with an assault-style rifle and traveled several hours to the store in a predominantly black community. Reports indicate that 11 of the 13 people shot were black, while 2 were white. Speaking on Sunday, President Joe Biden urged Americans to, quote, work together to address the hate that remains a stain on the soul of America. Vice President Kamala Harris, meanwhile, denounced the epidemic of hate across the nation. In Japan on Sunday, hundreds of protesters came from across the country for rallies in Okinawa, demanding a reduction of U.S. military forces on the island on the 50th anniversary of Okinawa's return to Japan, following 27 years of U.S. rule. In Naha City, more than 1,000 people from Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki and Okinawa held an indoor gathering. Protesters said that military bases have been strengthened instead of reduced and suggested that their presence is not intended to protect Japanese citizens, but instead part of U.S. military strategy. Citing incidents and crimes committed by U.S. troops in the region, residents countered that their presence makes the prefecture more dangerous. Shanghai will slowly reopen shopping malls and hair salons from Monday following a strict 6-week COVID-19 lockdown, according to the city's vice mayor on Sunday. Shopping malls, department stores and supermarkets will resume business, allowing customers to shop in a, quote, orderly way. Hair salons and vegetable markets will also reopen with limited capacity. This comes as residents during lockdown were limited to purchasing necessities, with normal shopping on online platforms mostly suspended. According to a city official, Shanghai will also announce a third whitelist soon, allowing more than 820 import and export companies to resume operations. In Turin on Sunday, Ukraine's Kalush Orchestra were crowned winners at the 2022 Eurovision Song Contest. Sitting in 4th place following jury votes, the rap folk band surged to the top of the leaderboard following the announcement of the results of the public vote. Speaking at the first news conference after the win, the group's frontman said the victory was important for Ukraine. The band's song Stefania, sung in Ukrainian, is a fusion of rap and traditional folk music. It is also the 3rd time that Ukraine has won the annual competition. The streets of London saw the inaugural race of the e-scooter championship on Saturday. The 12-turn 470-meter course built in the Surrey Quays area saw 30 riders across 10 teams participate in a series of 10-minute 6-rider knockout races. Switzerland's Mathis Neyrode powered his electric scooter to first place, followed by Britain's Dan Brooks and Indian rider Anish Shetty. The e-scooter machines weigh roughly 40 kilograms and feature 2 6-kilowatt motors and can reach top speeds above 100 kilometers per hour. More races are slated for Switzerland, Italy, France, Spain and the United States, with Asia and Africa likely to be added from next season. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Monday afternoon. We're in the middle of spring with clear skies, wide gaps in readings, but no dust. And temperatures are on the rise due to a southwesterly wind blowing into the country. While highs are slightly higher than yesterday, further wide gaps in readings are expected. So factor that in and stay warm. The UV index will be high, so don't forget to put on your sunscreen. And high ozone levels are expected in many regions. Please refrain from unnecessary travel in the afternoon if you live in these areas on the map. Now that a dry weather advisory has been issued, mainly in portions of western regions and Gyeongsang-namdo province, so I strongly suggest that you take extra precautions to prevent fires, especially in mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province. Strong gusts only worsen wildfire conditions. It seems like there will be no escape from temperature changes throughout the day for a while, so please be careful not to catch a cold in this changeable season. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
Those are the latest stories on Arirang News at this hour. Do stay with us for more of the day's headlines in our following newscasts.